Chapter 19 of Max Havelaar by Multatuli, translated by Alphonse Nahoys. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 19, composed by Sterne. In the private letter which Mr. Slimmering sent to Havelaar, he communicated to him that he, notwithstanding his pressing business, would come the next day to Rangkas-Beton to deliberate on what ought to be done. Havelaar, who knew what such a deliberation meant (his predecessor had so often deliberated with the resident of Pantin), wrote the following letter, which he sent to meet the resident and be read by him before his arrival at Labec. No. 91, Private Immediate, Rangkas-Beton, 25th February, 1856, 11 P.M. Yesterday at 12 o'clock I had the honor to send you my missive, immediate, No. 88, containing in substance that I, after a long investigation and after having tried in vain to bring back by moderation the party concerned from his perversity, felt myself obliged by my official oath to accuse the Regent of Labec of abuse of power, and to add that I suspected him of extortion. I have taken the liberty to propose to you in that letter to summon that native chief to Serang in order to examine after his departure, and after the corrupting influence of his extensive family had been neutralized, whether my accusation and suspicion were well founded. Long, or to speak more accurately, much have I reflected before determining upon this. I took care to let you know that I have endeavored, by exhortation and threats, to save the old Regent from misfortune and shame, and myself from the deep regret of having been the immediate cause of his troubles. But on the other hand I saw the, for many years, plundered and much oppressed population. I thought of the necessity of an example, for I shall have to report to you many more vexations, if at least this affair, by its reaction, makes no end of them, and I repeat it, after mature consideration I did what I thought to be my duty. I have just received your kind and esteemed private letter communicating that you will come here to morrow, and at the same time a hint that I ought to have treated this affair privately at first. To morrow I shall therefore have the honor to see you, and it is exactly on that account that I have taken the liberty to send you this letter, to add, before our meeting, the following considerations. All my investigations about the Regent were quite secret. Only he and the Pate, adjutant of the Regent, knew it, for I myself had frankly warned him. Even the Controller knows only a part of my investigations. This secrecy had a double aim. At first, when I still hoped to bring back the Regent to the right way, it was my object, if I succeeded, not to compromise him. The Pate thanked me in the name of the Regent for this discretion. It was on the 12th inst. But afterwards, when I began to despair of the success of my endeavors, or rather when the measure of my indignation overflowed on hearing of a recent occurrence, when a longer silence would have become participation as an accomplice, then that secrecy would have been to my advantage, for I too have to fulfill duties towards my household and myself. For after writing my letter of yesterday I should be unworthy to serve the Government if what I wrote down then was vain, unfounded, or invented, and would or will it be possible to me to prove that I have done what a good assistant resident ought to do, to prove that I am not unworthy the functions which I have received, to prove that I do not risk thoughtlessly and rashly my 17 hard years in the service of the Government, and, what is of more importance still, the interest of wife and child, will it be possible for me to prove all this unless deep secrecy does not hide my investigations and prevent the criminal from concealing himself? At the least suspicion the Regent would send an express to his nephew, who is coming here, and whose interest it is to maintain him at any sacrifice, and to distribute money with a profuse hand to every one whom he had recently swindled. The consequence would be I need not say will be that I have passed a rash judgment, and am an unserviceable functionary, not to say worse. To prevent that result I write this letter. I have the highest esteem for you, but I know the spirit of East Indian functionaries, and I do not possess that spirit. Your hint that it would have been better to have treated the affair privately at first makes me apprehensive of such a course. What I said in my missive of yesterday is true, but perhaps it would seem untrue if the affair was treated in such a manner as would reveal my accusation and suspicion before the removal of the Regent. I may not conceal from you that even your unexpected arrival in connection with the express sent by me yesterday to Serang gives me reason to fear that the accused, who would not listen to my exhortations, will now awake too soon, and endeavor, if possible, tant soit peu, to exculpate himself. I have the honor to say that I still refer literally to my missive of yesterday, but I take the liberty to observe that this missive contained a proposal to remove the Regent before the investigation, and previously to make his adherents harmless, and at the same time that I believe myself to be no further responsible for what I advanced than so far as you may be pleased to agree to my proposition as regards the manner of investigation, that it should be impartial, open, and above all free. This liberty cannot exist before the removal of the Regent, and according to my humble opinion there is nothing dangerous in that, as he can be told that I accuse him, and suspect him, that I am in danger, and not he, in the event of his innocence being established. For I myself am of opinion that I ought to be dismissed, if it shall appear that I have acted precipitately or rashly. Precipitately, after years and years of abuses; rashly, as if an honest man could sleep and live and enjoy, while they, over whose welfare he is called upon to watch, who are in the highest sense his neighbors, suffer extortion and injustice. I have been here, it is true, but a short time. I hope, however, that the question will for once be what has been done, if anything has been well done, and not whether it has been done in too short a time. For me every moment is too long, when characterized by extortion and oppression, and every second weighs heavy on me that is passed in misery by my negligence, by my spirit of arranging. I regret the days which I allowed to pass away before reporting to you officially, and I apologize for that neglect. I have taken the liberty to request you to give me the opportunity to justify my letter of yesterday, and to guarantee me against the miscarriage of my endeavors to free the province of Lebac from the worms which have gnawed, since the memory of man, at its welfare. It is therefore that I have again taken the liberty of asking you to approve my action, which consists only of investigating, reporting, and proposing to remove the Regent of Lebac, without direct or indirect notice beforehand, and moreover to order an investigation to take place of what I communicated in my letter of yesterday, No. 88. The Assistant Resident of Lebac. Signed, Max Havelaar. This request not to take the criminals under his protection the Resident received on the way. An hour after his arrival at Racaspeton he paid a visit to the Regent, and asked him whether he could say anything to the prejudice of the Assistant Resident, and whether he, the Regent, wanted money. To the first question the Regent replied, "I have nothing against him, I can solemnly swear to that." The second question he answered in the affirmative, whereupon the Resident gave him a couple of bank notes. It may be understood that Havelaar knew nothing of this. We shall see by and by how he became acquainted with so shameful a transaction. When the resident Slimmering entered Havelaar's house he was paler than usual, and the intervals between his words were longer than ever. It was indeed no small thing for a man who so excelled in arranging and making out the yearly reports of tranquillity to receive so unexpectedly letters in which there was no trace either of optimism or of artificial coloring, or of fear of the disapprobation of the government. The resident of Bantam was in a fright, and if I may be forgiven the ignoble comparison for the sake of exactness, I feel inclined to liken him to a little street boy who complains of the violation of old customs, because he has been beaten without previous abusive language. He began by asking the controller why the latter had not endeavored to restrain Havelaar from his accusation. Poor Verbrugge, who was entirely unacquainted with the circumstances, said so, but was not believed. Mr. Slimmering could not believe that any person without assistance could do his duty in such a manner. As Verbrugge, however, maintained his ignorance, the resident began to read Havelaar's letters. What Verbrugge suffered in listening is indescribable. He was an honest man, and would not have lied if Havelaar had appealed to him to confirm the truth of the contents of these letters. But even without that honesty he had not always been able to avoid the truth in many written reports, even where it was dangerous to tell it. How would it be if Havelaar made use of those reports? After having read these letters the resident said that if Havelaar chose to recall these documents it would be agreeable to him to consider them as not written, which Havelaar firmly but politely refused. Having in vain tried to move him to this, the resident said that he must investigate the charges, and that he had therefore to request Havelaar to summon the witnesses in support of the accusation he had brought against the Regent. Ye poor creatures, whose sides had been wounded by the thorns in the ravine, how anxiously would your hearts have beaten if you could have heard this request! And you, poor Verbrugge, you first witness, chief witness, ex officio witness, a witness in virtue of office and oath, a witness who had already borne witness on paper, which lay there on the table under Havelaar's hand. Havelaar replied: Mr. Resident, I am assistant resident of Labec. I have promised to protect the population from extortion and tyranny. I accuse the Regent and his son-in-law of parang kujang. I will prove my accusation as soon as that opportunity is given me, which I proposed in my letters. I am guilty of slander if this accusation is false. How freely Verbrugge breathed again, and how strange the resident thought Havelaar's words! The conversation lasted long. With politeness, for Slimmering was polite and well bred, he urged Havelaar to turn aside from such wrong principles, but with as much politeness the latter remained immovable. The result was that the resident had to yield, in saying as a threat what was to Havelaar a victory, that he should be compelled to bring the matter under the notice of the government. The meeting was ended. The resident paid the visit to the Regent to put to him the questions already mentioned, and then dined at the scanty board of the Havelaars, after which he returned in great haste to Serang, because he had still so much to do. The next day Havelaar received a letter from the resident of Bantam, the contents of which may be understood from the reply, of which I here give a copy. No. 93, Private, Rancas Betong, 28th February, 1856. I have had the honor to receive your missive of the 26th inst. La. O. Private, containing mainly the following: that you had reasons for not accepting the proposals made in both my official letters of the 24th and 25th inst., Nos. 88 and 91, that you had desired a previous confidential communication, that you do not approve of my transactions described in both those letters, and lastly some orders. I have now the honor again to assert, as I did verbally in the meeting of the day before yesterday, that I fully respect the legality of your power as regards deciding whether to accept my proposition or not, that the orders received shall with exactness be obeyed, with self-sacrifice, if need be, as if you were present to witness all I do or say, or, more properly, all I do not do or do not say. I know that you place confidence in my good faith in this matter, but I take the liberty solemnly to protest against the least semblance of disapprobation of any action, any word, any phrase, done, spoken, or written by me in this matter. I am convinced that I have done my duty, in my object and in the manner of executing it quite my duty, nothing but my duty, without the least deviation. I have long pondered before acting, that is, before examining, reporting, and proposing, and if I have been to a certain extent mistaken in anything, my fault was not precipitancy. In the same circumstances I should do again, yet a little quicker, exactly the same. Even if it happened that a higher power than yours disapproved anything which I did, except perhaps the peculiarity of my style, which is a part of myself, a defect for which I am as little responsible as a stammerer for his defect. Even if that happened, but no, that cannot be, even if it were so, I have done my duty. Certainly I am sorry, yet without being astonished, that you judge differently of this, and as far as regards myself, I should rely upon what appears to me to be a slight, but there is a question about a principle, and I have conscientious reasons which require that it shall be decided which opinion is correct, yours or mine. Serve otherwise than I served at Labac I cannot. If the government desires to be served otherwise, then I shall be obliged as an honest man to ask the government to discharge me. Then I must endeavor, at the age of 36 years, to commence a new career. Then I, after 17 years, after 17 heavy, difficult years of service as a functionary, after having devoted the best of my lifetime to what I considered to be my duty, then I must again ask society for bread, if it will give me bread, for my wife and child, bread in exchange for thoughts, bread perhaps in exchange for labor with spade or wheelbarrow, if the strength of my arm is approved for more than that of my soul. But I cannot and will not believe that your opinion is shared by His Excellency the Governor General, and I am therefore compelled, before I pass to the bitter extreme of what I wrote in the last paragraph, to beg you respectfully to propose to the Government to order the Resident of Bantam to approve so far the transactions of the Assistant Resident of Lebac, including his letters of the 24th and 25th inst., numbers 88 and 91, or to call the above-mentioned Assistant Resident to account on the points of disapprobation to be given by the Resident of Bantam. I have, finally, the honor to give you the grateful assurance that if anything could bring me back from my long calculated and calm, but fervently adhered to principles in this, it would have been indeed the polite, engaging manner in which you, at the meeting of the day before yesterday, opposed those principles. The Assistant Resident of Lebac. Signed, Max Havelaar. Without deciding as to the correctness of the suspicions of Slaughtering's widow concerning the cause which made her children orphans, and only accepting what may be proved that there was a strong connection in Lebac between fulfillment of duty and poison, even if that connection existed only in public opinion, yet it may be conceived that Max and Tine passed sorrowful days after the visit of the Resident. I believe that I need not paint the anguish of a mother who, when offering food to her child, has continually to ask whether she is not perhaps murdering her darling. And certainly little Max was an adored child, who had stayed away 7 years after the marriage, as if the rogue knew that it was no advantage to come into the world as the son of such parents. 29 long days had Havelaar to wait before the Governor General communicated with him, but we are not yet so far. A short time after the vain endeavor to move Havelaar to withdraw his letters, or to betray the poor people who had confided in his magnanimity, Verbrugge entered Havelaar's house. The good man was deadly pale, and had some difficulty in speaking. "I have been with the Regent," he said. "It is scandalous, but do not betray me." "What? What must I not betray?" "Do you pledge me your word to make no use of what I shall tell you?" "More halfness," said Havelaar. "But well, I pledge my word." And then Verbrugge told Havelaar what the reader knows already, that the Resident had asked the Regent if the latter could say anything against the Assistant Resident, and had quite unexpectedly given him money. At the same time Verbrugge knew it from the Regent himself, who had asked him what reasons the Resident could have had for this. Havelaar was indignant, but he had pledged his word. The next day Verbrugge returned and said that Duclari had told him how ignoble it was to leave Havelaar, who had to fight such opponents, so completely alone, whereupon Verbrugge released him from his pledge. "Very well," said Havelaar, "write it down." Verbrugge wrote it down. This declaration is likewise before me. The reader will have long understood why I renounced so cheaply any pretensions to authenticity in the history of Seija. It was touching to observe how Verbrugge, timorous before he was awakened by the reproaches of Duclari, dared to trust Havelaar's pledged word in a matter which so induced violation of it. And another thing. Years have passed since the events which I relate. Havelaar has suffered much during this time. He has seen the suffering of his household. The documents which lie before me bear witness of this, and it seems that he has waited. I give the following note from his hand: "I read in the newspapers that Mr. Slimering has been made Knight of the Order of the Dutch Lion. He appears to be now Resident of Jogjakarta. I can therefore now speak of the affairs of Lebak without danger to Verbrugge." Chapter 19. Chapter 20 of Max Havelaar by Multatuli, translated by Alphonse Nathoys. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 20. Composed by Sterne. It was evening. Tine was reading in the inner gallery, and Havelaar was drawing an embroidery pattern. Little Max was putting together a puzzle picture, and was getting angry because he could not find that red lady's body. "Will it be right so, Tine?" asked Havelaar. "See, I have made this palm a little larger. It is exactly Hogarth's line of beauty." "Yes, Max, but these lace holes are too near each other." "Are they? And the others?" "Max, do let me see your trousers. Have you that stripe?" "Ah, I remember when you embroidered that, Tine." "Not I. Where, then?" "It was at The Hague, when Max was ill, and we were so frightened because the physician said that he had such an uncommonly shaped head, and that so much care was required to prevent congestion of the brain. Then you were busy with that stripe." Tine went and kissed the little one. "I have found her stomach! I have found her stomach!" cried the little boy gaily, and the red lady was complete. "Whose bedtime is it?" asked the mother. "Mine, but I have not yet supped," said little Max. "You shall have some supper first, of course." And she rose up and gave him his simple supper, which she seemed to have fetched out of a well secured cupboard in her room, for the noise of many locks had been heard. "What are you giving him?" asked Havelaar. "Oh, don't be uneasy. It is biscuit out of the tin box from Batavia, and the sugar, too, has been kept under lock and key." Havelaar's thoughts turned again to the point where they had been interrupted. "Do you know," he continued, "that we have not yet paid that doctor's bill?" "Oh, that is very hard. Dear Max, we live so economically here. We shall soon be able to pay all. Moreover, you will certainly soon be appointed resident, and then all will be arranged in a little time." "That is exactly the thing that makes me sad," said Havelaar. "I should be so unwilling to leave Labec. I will explain that to you. Don't you believe that we loved our Max more after his illness? Now it appears to me that I shall love poor Lebac still more after it has recovered from the cancer from which it has suffered for so many years. The thought of promotion frightens me, and yet on the other side, when I think again that we have debts— "All will be right, Max. Even if you had to go from here, then you could help Lebac afterwards on being made Governor General." Then came wild lines in Havelaar's pattern. There was anger in those flowers. Those strips were sharp, angular, crossing each other. Tina understood that she had said something wrong. "Dear Max," she began kindly. "A curse on it! Will you have them starve so long? Can you live on sand?" "Dear Max!" But he jumped up from his chair, and there was no more drawing that evening. He went up and down in the inner gallery, and at last he spoke in a tone which would have sounded rough and hard to every stranger, but which was thought of quite differently by Tina. "A curse on this indifference, this shameful indifference! Here I have waited a month for justice, and meanwhile the poor people are suffering terribly. The Regent seems to calculate upon nobody daring to take it up against him. Look!" He went into his office and came back with a letter in his hand, a letter which lies before me, reader. "Look, in this letter he dares to make me proposals about the kind of labor which he intends to have done by men whom he has summoned unlawfully. Is that not shamelessness going too far? And do you know who these persons are? They are women with little children, with sucklings, women who are pregnant, who have been driven from Parang Kujang to the capital to work for him. There are no more men, and they have nothing to eat, and they sleep on the road and eat sand. Can you eat sand? Must they eat sand till I am Governor General? Curse it!" Tina knew very well with whom alone Max was angry, when he spoke thus to her whom he loved. "And," continued Havelaar, "that is all on my responsibility. If at this moment some of these poor creatures are wandering there outside, and seeing the light of our lamps, will say, 'There lives the wretch who ought to protect us. There he sits quietly with his wife and child, and draws embroidery patterns, while we lie here like dogs on the road, and starve with our children.' Yes, I hear it, I hear it, that cry for vengeance upon my head. Here, Max, here!" And he kissed the child with a wildness which frightened it. "My child, if they tell you that I am a wretch, who had no courage to do justice, that so many mothers have died by my fault, if they tell you that the neglect of your father stole away the bliss of your life, Max, bear witness how I suffered." And he burst into tears, which Tina kissed away. Then she put little Max to bed, a mat of straw, and when she returned found Havelaar in conversation with Verbrugge and Duclari, who had just come in. The conversation was about the expected decision of the government. "I understand very well that the Resident is in a difficult position," said Duclari. "He cannot advise the government to accept your proposals, for then too much would be brought to light. I have been long in Bantam, and know much about it, more than you, Mr. Havelaar. I was here as sub lieutenant, and in that position one hears things that the native does not dare to tell the functionaries. But if now, after an open investigation, all this comes to light, the Governor General will summon the Resident to account for it, and ask him how it is that he has not discovered in 2 years what was obvious to you immediately. He must, therefore, prevent that investigation." "I have considered that," replied Havelaar, "and put on my guard by his endeavors to move the Regent to say something against me, which seems to show that he will try to remove the question, for instance, by accusing me of I don't know what. I have covered myself against that by sending copies of my letters direct to the Government. In one of these letters I begged to be called to account, if perhaps it should be pretended that I had done something wrong. If now the Resident of Bantan attacks me, no decision can be made according to justice before I have been heard. That is allowed even to a criminal, and I have done nothing wrong." "There is the post," said Verbrugge. Yes, it was the post that brought the following letter from the Governor General of the Dutch Indies to Havelaar, late Assistant Resident of Lebak. Official, No. 54, Buitenzorg, 23 March, 1856. The manner in which you have acted on the discovery or supposition of wrongdoing on the part of the chiefs in the district of Lebak, and your attitude towards your superior, the Resident of Bantan, have excited in a high degree my displeasure. In your acts there is not only a want of the deliberate judgment, caution, and prudence so indispensable to a functionary entrusted with power in the interior of Java, but also notions of insubordination to your immediate superior. Only a few days after your appointment to your present office you made the head of the native government of Lebak the subject of irritating examinations, without first consulting the Resident. In these examinations you found cause, without substantiating your accusations against that chief by facts, much less by proofs, to make proposals which tended to subject a native functionary of the rank of the Regent of Lebak, a man of 60 years, but still a zealous servant, related to neighboring influential regents, and of whom favorable testimony has always been given, to a morally quite annihilating treatment. Moreover, you have, when the Resident did not feel inclined to give his consent to your proposals, refused to satisfy the just desire of your superior that you should say openly what you knew of the actions of the native government of Lebak. Such conduct merits all disapprobation, and sanctions belief in your incapacity to bear office in the interior government of Java. I am therefore obliged to dismiss you from your employment as Assistant Resident of Lebak. Yet, in consideration of the favorable reports received formerly of you, I have not found cause to deprive you of the prospect of again getting a situation in the government of the interior. I have therefore given you the temporary appointment of Assistant Resident of Ngawi. On your behavior in this office it will entirely depend whether you remain a functionary in the service of the government." And beneath that stood the name of the man on whose zeal, capacity, and good faith the King said that he could rely when he signed his appointment as Governor General of the Dutch Indies. "We go from here, dear Tine," said Havelaar, and he gave the letter to Verbrugge, who read the document with Duclari. Verbrugge had tears in his eyes, but did not speak. Duclari, a very polite and well-bred man, burst out with a wild curse. I have seen rogues and thieves in the government here. They have gone from here with honors, and to you they write such a letter." "It is nothing," said Havelaar. "The Governor General is an honest man. He must be deceived, though he could have guarded himself against that deceit by first hearing me. But I will go to him and show him how matters stand here. He will do justice, I am certain of it." But if you go to Gnawe, I know this for certain, the Regent of Gnawe is related to the Regent of Bantam. I should have to do the same at Gnawe that I have done here. That would be a useless journey. Moreover, it was impossible for me to serve the trial as if I had behaved ill. And, finally, I see that to put an end to all this deceit I can no longer be a functionary. As functionary there are too many persons between me and the government who have an interest in denying the misery of the population. There are other reasons that prevent me from going to Gnawe. There was no vacancy there. There has been one made for me. Look here." And he showed the Javanese newspaper, which had come by the same post, that indeed, in the same decree of the government whereby he was appointed assistant resident of Gnawe, the assistant resident of that place was appointed to another district where there was a vacancy. Do you know why I have to go to Gnawe, and not to the district where there was a vacancy? I will tell you. The resident of Maduen, to which Gnawe belongs, is the brother-in-law of the late resident of Bantam. I have said that such scandalous things went on here, that the Regent had had such bad examples. "Ah!" cried Verbrugge and Duclari at the same time. They understood why Havelaar was transferred to Gnawe in particular, to be tried if he would perhaps correct himself. "And there is still another reason why I cannot go there," said he. "The present Governor General will soon resign. I do not know his successor, nor what I may expect of him." In the original manuscript the author wrote, "I know his successor. I know what I may expect of him." This was changed against the will and without the knowledge of the author. We give this note with the authorization of the author. In order to do something in time for those poor people I must speak to the present governor before his departure, and if I went now to Gnawe that would be impossible. Tine, dear Max, you have courage, have you not? Max, you know I have courage when I am with you. Good. He went and wrote the following, in his own opinion an example of eloquence. Rancas Beton, 29th March, 1856. To the Governor General of the Dutch Indies. I have had the honor to receive the official letter of Your Excellency of the 23rd inst., No. 54. In reply to that document I feel constrained to beg Your Excellency to grant me an honorable discharge from the service of the government. Signed, Max Havelaar. It needed not so long a time at Buitenzorg to grant the asked-for discharge as was needed to decide how Havelaar's accusation could be turned away. For the latter a month was required, and the news of the discharge arrived in a few days at Labec. "God be praised," said Tine, "that you can be your own self at last." Havelaar received no instructions to surrender the government to Verbrugge. He therefore awaited his successor. The latter was a long time in coming, because he had to travel from a remote corner of Java. After waiting 3 weeks, the ex officio assistant resident of Labec, who had, however, still acted as such, wrote the following letter to the Controller Verbrugge. No. 153, Rancas Beton, 15th of April, 1856. To the Controller of Labec. You know that I have received at my own request an honorable discharge from the service of the government by decree of 4th inst., No. 4. Perhaps I should have acted rightly if, on the receipt of this decree, I had resigned my office of assistant resident immediately, as it seems to be an anomaly to fulfill a function without being a functionary. Yet I received no instructions to surrender my office, and partly from the idea of the obligation not to leave my post without being duly relieved, partly from causes of subordinate interest, I waited for the arrival of my successor, thinking that that functionary would arrive soon, at least this month. Now I hear from you that my successor may not be expected so soon. You have, as I think, heard this news at Serang, and at the same time that the Resident was astonished that I, in the very peculiar position in which I am, have not yet asked to be allowed to transfer the Government to you. Nothing could be more agreeable to me than this news, for I need not assure you that I, who have declared myself unable to serve otherwise than I have done, who have been punished for this way of serving with censure, note literally for the manner in which I served, with a ruinous and discreditable transfer, with an order to betray the poor men who confided in my good faith, with a choice also between dishonor and starvation, that I had to consider with pains and care everything if it was in harmony with my duty, and that the most simple matter was difficult for me, placed as I was between my conscience and the principles of the Government, to which I owe fidelity as long as I am not freed from my functions. This difficulty showed itself principally in the reply which I had to give to plaintiffs. I had once promised to betray nobody to the rancor of his chiefs. Once I had, imprudently enough, given my word for the justice of the Government. The poor population could not know that this promise and this bail had been denied, and that I, poor and impotent, stood alone with my desire for justice and humanity. And people went on complaining. It was painful, after the receipt of the missive of 23d March, to sit there as a supposed refuge, as a powerless protector. It was heartrending to hear the complaints of ill treatment, extortion, poverty, hunger, whilst I myself had, with a wife and child, to meet hunger and poverty. Neither could I betray the Government. I might not say to these poor people, "Go and suffer, for it is the will of the Government that you should suffer extortion." I might not avow my impotence, one as it was with the shame and unconscionableness of the Governor General's counselors. Here is what I replied: I cannot help you immediately, but I will go to Batavia. I will speak to the Governor about your misery. He is just, and he will assist you. Go now quietly to your home. Do not oppose, do not remove, wait patiently. I hope that justice will be done. So I thought, ashamed as I was of the violation of my promise of help, to bring my ideas in harmony with my duty to the Government, which pays me still this month, and I would have continued thus till the arrival of my successor, if a particular occurrence had not obliged me to-day to put an end to this equivocal position. 7 persons have complained. I gave them the above-mentioned reply. They returned to their homes. The district chief met them on the way. He must have forbidden them to leave their village again, and taken away, as I am told, their clothes, to oblige them to remain at home. One of them escaped, came to me again, and declared that he did not dare to return to his village. What I ought to reply to this man I did not know. I could not protect him. I might not avow my impotence. I would not prosecute the accused chief, because this would have appeared as if the matter had been picked up by me pour le besoin de ma cause. I did not know what to do. I charge you, until further instructions from the Resident of Bantam, with the Government of the District of Labac, from tomorrow morning. The Assistant Resident of Labac. Signed, Max Havelaar. Then Havelaar departed with wife and child from Rangkas-Betong. He refused all escort. Duclari and Verbrugge were deeply touched at the leave-taking. Max was likewise moved, above all when he found at the first stage a great number of persons who had gone secretly from Rangkas-Betong to bid him a last farewell. At Serang the family was received into the house of Mr. Slingering with the ordinary Indian hospitality. In the evening many visitors came to the Resident. They said they had come to say farewell to Havelaar, and Havelaar received many an eloquent shake of the hand. But he had to go to Batavia to speak to the Governor General. When they arrived there he sought for an audience. This was refused him because his Excellency had a pain in his foot. Havelaar waited till the foot was cured, then he again sought an audience. His Excellency "had so much to do that he had been obliged to refuse an audience even to the Director General of Finance, and could not see Havelaar." Havelaar waited till his Excellency should have struggled through all this. Meanwhile he felt something like jealousy for the persons who had to help his Excellency in his labor, for he liked to work quickly and hard, and generally so much business disappeared under his hand. This was, however, out of the question. Havelaar's labor was heavier than labor. He waited. He waited. At last he again sought an audience. He received an answer that his Excellency could not see him, as he had too much to do, being on the point of departure. Max sought the favor of his Excellency to be heard for half an hour as soon as there should be some space between two businesses. At last he heard that his Excellency would depart the next day. That was a thunderbolt for him. Still he believed with spasmodic energy that the resigning Governor was an honest man and had been deceived. A quarter of an hour would have sufficed to prove the justice of his cause, and it appeared that this quarter of an hour would not be granted to him. I find among Havelaar's papers the copy of a letter which he seems to have written to the retiring Governor General on the last evening before his departure to the mother country. In the corner I find the words written in pencil, "Not exact," which gives me to understand that some phrases were changed in copying. I make this observation in order that no doubt may arise regarding the authenticity of the other official documents which I have communicated, and which have all been signed by another hand for exact copy. I mention this because of the want of literal conformity with this document. Perhaps he to whom this letter was addressed may feel inclined to make public the exact text. Then one may see how far Havelaar deviated from this copy. Batavia, 23 May, 1856. Your Excellency, my official request by missive of 28th February to be heard on the affairs of Labec has remained unanswered. Neither has your Excellency thought fit to grant my repeated request for an audience. A functionary who was favorably known to the Government, I quote your Excellency's own words, one who has served his country in these regions for 17 years, one who not only never neglected his duty, but who conceived what was good with unexampled self-sacrifice, and who chose to sacrifice all for honor and duty, such a one your Excellency has placed beneath the criminal, for the criminal is at least heard. That they have deceived your Excellency with regard to me I understand, but that your Excellency did not catch the opportunity to escape from this deceit I do not understand. Tomorrow your Excellency goes from here, and I may not let you depart without having said once more that I did my duty, only my duty, with judgment, with calmness, with humanity, with moderation, and with courage. The grounds on which is based the censure contained in your Excellency's missive of 23d March are entirely invented and false. I can prove this, and it would have been proved already if your Excellency had granted me half an hour's interview, if your Excellency could have found half an hour to do justice. This you could not, and an honest family has been ruined. Yet I do not complain of this, but your Excellency has sanctified the system of abuse of power, of plunder and murder by which the poor Javanese suffer, and I complain of that. That is what I complain of. Your Excellency, blood cleaves to the money saved out of the Indian salary thus earned. Once more I beg for a moment's interview, be it this night, be it early tomorrow. And again I do not ask this for myself, but for the cause which I defend, the cause of justice and humanity, which is at the same time the cause of good policy. If your Excellency can reconcile it with your conscience to depart from here without hearing me, mine will be quiet in the persuasion that I have endeavored all that I could to prevent the sad bloody events which will soon be the consequence of the self-willed ignorance in which the Government is left as regards the population. Signed, Max Havelaar. Havelaar waited that evening. He waited the whole night. He had hoped that perhaps anger at the tone of his letter would bring about what he had tried in vain to obtain by moderation and patience. His hope was vain. The Governor-General departed without having heard Havelaar. Another Excellency had retired to the mother country to rest. Havelaar wandered about poor and neglected. He sought. Enough, my good Sterne. I, Multatuli, take up the pen. You are not called upon to write Havelaar's biography. I created you. I brought you over from Hamburg. I taught you good Dutch in a very short time. I made you kiss Louise Rosemeyer, of the Rosemeyers, who trade in sugar. It is enough. Sterne, you may go. This Shawman and his wife. Stop, miserable spawn of dirty covetousness and blasphemous hypocrisy. I created you. You have grown into a monster under my pen. I am disgusted with my own creation. Choke yourself with coffee and begone. Yes, I, Multatuli, who have suffered much, I take the pen. I do not make any excuses for the form of my book. That form was thought proper to obtain my object. That object has a double end. In the first place I would bring forward something which may be preserved as a holy Pusaka by little Max and his sister when their parents have died of sheer want. I would give to these children a testimonial from my own hand. And in the second place I will be read. Yes, I will be read. I will be read by statesmen, who are obliged to pay attention to the signs of the times; by men of letters, who must also peep into the book of which so many bad things are said; by merchants, who have an interest in the coffee auctions; by ladies' maids, who read me for a few farthings; by governors general in retirement; by ministers who have something to do; by the lackeys of these excellencies; by mutes, who, more majorum, will say that I attack God Almighty where I attack only the God which they made according to their own image; by the members of the representative chambers, who must know what happens in the extensive possessions over the sea which belong to Holland. I shall be read. When I obtain this I shall be content, for I did not intend to write well. I wished to write so as to be heard, and as one who cries, "Stop thief!" does not care about the style of his impromptu address to the public, I too am indifferent to criticism of the manner in which I cried my "Stop thief." The book is a medley. There is no order, nothing but a desire to make a sensation. The style is bad, the author is inexperienced, no talent, no method. Good, good, all very well, but the Javanese are ill treated. For the merit of my book is this, that refutation of its main features is impossible, and the greater the disapprobation of my book, the better I shall be pleased, for the chance of being heard will be so much the greater, and that is what I desire. But you whom I dare to interrupt in your business, or in your retirement, ye ministers and governors general, do not calculate too much upon the inexperience of my pen. I could exercise it, and perhaps by dint of some exertions attain to that skill which would make the truth heard by the people. Then I should ask of that people a place in the representative chambers, were it only to protest against the certificates which are given vice versa by Indian functionaries; to protest against the endless expeditions sent and heroic deeds performed against poor, miserable creatures whose ill treatment has driven them to revolt; to protest against the cowardice of general orders that brand the honor of the nation by invoking public charity on behalf of the victims of inveterate piracy. It is true those rebels were reduced by starvation to skeletons, while those pirates could defend themselves; and if that place were refused me, if I were still disbelieved, then I should translate my book into the few languages that I know, and the many that I yet can learn, to put that question to Europe, which I have in vain put to Holland; and in every capital such a refrain as this would be heard: "There is a band of robbers between Germany and the Scheldt." And if this were of no avail, then I should translate my book into Malay, Japanese, Sundanese, Alfoer, Boiji, and Bata; and I should sharpen klewangs, the scimitars and the sabers, by rousing with warlike songs the minds of those martyrs whom I have promised to help. I, Multatuli, would do this. Yes, delivery and help, lawfully if possible, lawfully with violence if need be. And that would be very pernicious to the coffee auctions of the Dutch Trading Company. For I am no fly rescuing poet, no soft dreamer, like the down trodden Havelaar, who did his duty with the courage of a lion, and endured starvation with the patience of a marmot in winter. This book is an introduction. I shall increase in strength and sharpness of weapons according as it may be necessary. Heaven grant that it may not be necessary. No, it will not be necessary, for it is to thee I dedicate my book, William the Third, King, Grand Duke, Prince, more than Prince, Grand Duke and King, Emperor of the magnificent empire of Insulind, which winds about the equator like a garland of emeralds. I ask thee if it be thine imperial will that the Havelaars should be bespattered with the mud of the Slimmerings and Drystables, and that thy more than 30 millions of subjects far away should be ill treated and should suffer extortion in thy name? End of Chapter 20, and end of Max Havelaar, or The Coffee Auctions of the Dutch Trading Company, by Multatuli, translated by Alphonse Nahoys.